Hello, everybody, and welcome to session 2 of the Self-Made Strategy series. If you joined us for last week, you know that we spent a lot of time really looking at your business and the expenses of your business, thinking about where my business came from, what were my lead sources, where were my expenses on my business, and where were my expenses in direct correlation to those sources of business. Looking at your return on investment and maybe starting to get a feel about where you'd want to be putting some of your resources and your time and energy in the new year. Well, now for series 2, we're going to be focusing on funding your life of intention or your life by design. So of course, one of the big philosophical questions that could be involved in that is kind of asking yourself, what is the purpose of life? Now, don't worry, we're not going to get so philosophical in this, but it is a really great conversation to be had because for so many of us, understanding what our purpose of life is and allowing that to be our North Star can sometimes be confusing or even potentially be slightly complicated. Thinking about what your life by design looks like or what a life of purpose means for you is going to be one of those questions that we want to frame to help us through today's session. So what's the purpose of life? Now, don't worry, we're not going to get so philosophical in this, but I do really genuinely believe that for myself, the purpose of life is to do good and to be good. And the way that we go about that and the way that we navigate through our day-to-day is oftentimes guided by this concept of doing good and being good. In a world where we're told about being famous or being an influencer or making tons of money or some of the other things that might get in the way, not necessarily saying that any of those are inherently bad in and of themselves, but asking ourselves, why are we actually here? Not even from the perspective of why were we given this chance or who put us here? What were the lessons that were supposed to be here? But rather, why am I here? What is the purpose that I plan to do during my time here? So, one of the ways, and I hate to be the bearer of bad news potentially, but one of the ways to frame our mind is that each one of us have an incurable, terminal disease that is called mortality. At the end of our days, during this lifetime, our body will be returned to the earth as a form of energy. And so asking ourselves, what do we do in that time is very, very important for us to get clarity on. We can easily get distracted by the ripples of drama, reality television, the things that we're told are supposed to be a priority. And then there is asking ourselves the question of what is it that we want our days to look like? Where would we want to spend our time? With whom do we want to spend it with? And so as I had mentioned in the first session, that there will be times when I'm going to ask you to do things that are going to have an air of being heavy if you make them heavy, right? But this is one of those exercises that has a very liberating and potentially mildly focusing way of looking at the way that you move through life and how you show up for those around you. And that is where you write your own obituary. Now, the concept of writing your own obituary is to think at the end of a long and healthy life, how do you want to be remembered? What are the things that you want people to say about you and their time with you, the experiences that they had with you? So what I'd like for you to do in your reflective resource is go ahead and hit pause with me here and write down your obituary. Now, for those of you that have kept playing, again, press pause. Do the exercise. Do not just skip through it. Do not make light of it. Also, do not make it so heavy that it feels like it's going to somehow ruin your day. Please realize that doing this exercise is going to be the basis for the rest of this lesson, as well as the rest of this series. Now that you have all completed the exercise of writing your obituary, what were some of the things that you had written? What were some of the key words that you put down? You probably noticed that you didn't mention how many transactions you did in your lifetime. You probably didn't mention the cars that you have or the amount of Beanie Babies that you've collected or any of the things that might be materialistic. You probably wrote things about how you showed up for those people in your world, how you helped those people that were in need, maybe how you had a wonderful relationship that developed with your parents or with your siblings or with your children. You might find that you also wrote about your adventures and the fact that you never met a stranger, Whatever were some of those things that you had put down, I want you to ask yourself and look back at this last year. Did your calendar this last year and the priorities that you made this last year, were they in alignment with the things that you wrote in your obituary? Or did you possibly find yourself deferring the vacations, deferring the experiences, neglecting certain relationships in the pursuit of more or in the pursuit of fame? Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't go after money or that you shouldn't go after your skill sets. What I'm saying is that it is important that you are in alignment with the things that you say are a priority for you. Not what the social media is telling you or the marketing department is telling you, but rather what you have said are the priorities, that at the end of your days, these are the things that matter to you the most. That is, for us, what is going to be the basis of this session. Now, we're going to spend time focusing on units and the amount of business you need to do, absolutely, for the funding aspect. But before we move into the funding your life of intention, I want to take just a little bit more time and ask you to kind of think about your goals for next year from an energy perspective. So in the next year, I want to see more of this on my weekly calendar. I want to make sure that this becomes a priority, these relationships, or seeing my mother once a week, or, I really want to pick up that hobby that I've neglected for many, many years. I want to be more present with my children. Whatever your answers are, I want you to be able to kind of write those down as some of the goals that you have for next year. In addition to the energy aspects of who you spend your time with or what most of your weeks look like, I also want you to think about what experiences you want to have. What memories do you want to make? What relationships do you want to strengthen? Go ahead in your reflective resource. You can hit pause, but go ahead in your reflective resource and write down some of those answers. The goal of where you're spending your time and energy in the new year. So realizing the answers that you've put down so far in these exercises, this is the purpose of life. This is the purpose of your life. The purpose of life of living with intention, to be good, to do good. To realize that the purpose of business is to fund that life, not necessarily become life. In a time when everyone is looking to be the next millionaire or billionaire, they're looking to be the next influencer, there is an air of the idea of success is that you must monetize every waking moment. Now, don't get me wrong, we're absolutely here to talk about money. We're here to talk about building a life of intention, to be able to fund that life of intention. But we want to make sure that it is about you doing the things that are important to you at the end of your days versus chasing whatever you're told is the thing that's supposed to be important to you. I think of the gentleman who came to me and of course says that he's working all of these hours so that he can provide a better life for his children and for his family. Yet he's never home. And when he is home, he is frustrated, or his mind is on work, and when he's at work, his mind is on home. And when he thinks of providing a better life for his family, he means that as nicer cars and bigger houses and nicer toys and the newest phone, versus spending quality time with those people that in his obituary, he wanted them to say he was a thoughtful and caring father. He was a father that was there for his children. He was a father that provided and did all of these things. And so realizing that we have to ask ourselves, are we having an honest conversation with where we're putting our energy and the life that we are pursuing? When we talk about the pursuit of happiness, is it our happiness or is it someone else's perception of happiness? I know that these questions sometimes can feel heavy. They can feel philosophical. They can feel like maybe they aren't relating to you at all, or maybe I'm speaking directly to you. But the concept here is, for so many of us, we move through life either as the perfect consumer or as the person who is getting up, doing the activities, paying the bills, going to sleep, getting up and doing it again. You might have found that this last year, you told yourself that you love to travel, but you've not traveled at all. You tell yourself that you're looking for financial independence, yet you've not moved anywhere closer to those activities. You might say that you want to build stronger relationships with your spouse, partner, significant other, yet you are further and further apart in this chase of doing more. There's a myth of more. And one of the calibers of that is, if I just do this, then I will be happy. If I just make $1 million, then I will be happy. If I just hit a certain amount of business, then I will be happy. If I lose a certain amount of pounds, then I'll be happy with the way that I look, right? This is the concept of, if something happens, then I will be happy, versus happiness happens along the way. So when we talk about a life of intention and a life that is of purpose, and I ask you to kind of look at this next year and where you want more of your energy to be put, how you would like to describe most of your weeks of the year, you will find that that happiness that happens along the way is going to make sure that you don't get burnout, that you don't feel lost or confused, that those moments of falling off and losing motivation doesn't take you months to get back. Because when we are centered in understanding what is purposeful for us, that we are grounded over the daily grind, that is when we're going to have a much clearer understanding. We're able to provide more of ourselves to those relationships around us. We get to be in alignment with what we say is purposeful, and we get to be more for the people that are in our world, both as our clients and as our family. So thinking about my life and what purpose looks like, those experiences that I'd like to have next year, maybe some of the memories that I would like to make, the progress that I might like to make in terms of building my wealth or my own financial security, then taking those activities, and then now is where we're going to focus on, how do we fund that life by design. You know, one of the most important aspects of this is this concept of your profits determine your profits. And what I mean by that is your profits, your PROFITS, determine your profits, your PROFITS. There's lots of people that are out there that are leaders, they are motivational speakers, they are writers, they are telling you what success looks like. And I remember I was reading a book earlier this year that's talking about the people who are unbelievable winners. It's something that is called obsession. And they're highlighting some of those people that as a society we have said were wildly successful. They do a deep dive on Elon Musk, on Steve Jobs, right? They're looking at some of these people who have been seen as some of the top in their fields. But one of the things that was fascinating about this book is it talks about obsession. Anybody who has an obsession, maybe they are elite athletes, maybe they're business individuals, oftentimes they're not well-rounded. There is not a holistic approach to life or a holistic approach to anything. They're hyper-focused in one area, oftentimes neglecting everything else along the way. They are socially inept. They get divorces. They have no relationships with their children. Even when they have amassed an extreme amount of wealth, they cannot enjoy it because they're constantly making sure that they're maintaining their status as number one or as the top of their game. So asking yourself, who are the people that you are listening to? Who are the people that you are looking up to as role models, that you're trying to emulate what your morning routine looks like or where you are putting your energy? You know, if you might be envious of someone and they're a role model of you, but they have a very lonely outlook on life, they are depressed to the point where they are self-medicating, maybe through the use of recreational drugs or alcohol. They have no strong relationship with their spouse, partner, significant other. They are estranged with their children. Is that the profit that you want to emulate? Is that the world that you're striving for? Is that what your definition of success looks like? Again, I'm not knocking anyone who is in the pursuit of success, in the pursuit of fame, in the pursuit of things, but I want to make sure that it is uniquely the outlook and the life that you want. So as you're looking at this next year, maybe setting some intentions for yourself, setting some intentions of how you want your energy to be spent, the relationships you want to build, the hobbies you want to develop, the things that bring you joy. When they are clearly outlined, it's something that you can revert back to anytime that you feel lost. That is going to be a very wonderful secret power for you, a superpower, if you will, that you're able to move through life and think about life with intention. Don't worry, things that might be important to you this year might not be important to you 6 months from now, or things that were important to you 6 months from now might not have been on your radar 4 years ago. That's okay, because as humans and a part of this human experience, things happen and the universe brings opportunities to you. So being open to those things while still being committed to the process is very important to yourself and your profits. All right, so let's go ahead and get into the funding your life by design. So during last session, we really focused on your business expenses, understanding how much money you made, what were some of those business expenses that you had, what was the ROI of where those lead sources came from. So the great news is that you've already done a lot of the legwork for your business expenses and that income. If you saw in your packet of information that we also included some of those monthly personal expenses that you had. Don't worry, if you didn't fill that out, that's part of our exercises for this week. So in order for us to determine how to fund our life by design, we have to understand what is the baseline of what our life costs at its current status. So looking at those business expenses, you know that you spend X amount of money on leads, on lead generation, on office supplies, on your lease for your office. Any of those things you've already kind of determined. Now we need to understand how much does it cost for you to run your household. So on that breakdown, you'll see that it's talking about monthly expenses. Maybe it's how much your mortgage is, your car payment, your car insurance, any subscription series, Paramount, Disney Plus, Netflix, any of those things, Amazon Prime. How much do you spend on alcohol on a monthly basis? How much do you spend on groceries? How much do you spend eating out? We want to get a baseline of these things, and what often happens is if I ask someone, how much does it cost you to run your house on a monthly basis? Usually their number is conservative. They're giving themselves a little bit too much credit because they're thinking about some of those fixed expenses, right? I know that my car payment is on the 25th of every month, or my phone bill is on the 13th of every month, and they know that that's a pretty set number. But they don't actually know how much they spend on Amazon every single month. They don't know how much they spend when they go out to restaurants on a monthly basis. They've never established a budget when they go to the grocery store. They buy what they need or what they think they need. They're not planning meals. They just kind of grab as they walk through the aisles. And then when they're at home, they kind of throw things together and that becomes their dinners. Again, there's nothing wrong with this. What it is it's an understanding that if you do not have clarity or if you do not know what you're spending, how could you possibly make an intentional change in any of those areas? Or how could you possibly double down without having clarity? So what we want to do here is we want to look at what are your monthly expenses, and then we will annualize that. So on that form, it has some really great topics that are there. These are not exhaustive. They don't have everything, but there's a lot of really great things that usually are topics that we talk about in terms of monthly expenses. Go ahead and fill this out so that you can have a determination of how much it costs you to operate your household. Now that you know your monthly cost and you've annualized that over a 12-month period, I want you to go ahead and look at that number and get some clarity about what was there. Is this under what you thought it cost you to run your life on a monthly basis? Is it more? Are there areas that maybe you were a little bit more frivolous or that you'd like to set intentions about? In your reflective resource, go ahead and look at some of the answers that you've given and think about where are the ways that you might want to make some changes in the new year. If you'd like, a really great recommendation would be to go back and do the red, yellow, green exercise that you did for your business expenses. You can do the exact same thing for personal. Maybe you have a subscription series that you've not used in many months. Maybe there is an app that you're paying for that you used for 14 days, or you forgot that you signed up for the free trial and now they've been charging you on a monthly basis. Maybe there is Instacart or something like that that you've signed up for that you're not really using, right? We first start with the subscriptions, and then just like we did with our business expenses, are there any of these areas that you might be able to negotiate discounts or renegotiate those packages? For those of you that have cable television or your internet, there are always promotions of competitors that are going back and forth. Maybe you have Spectrum or you have Verizon. Look at what the other company is offering. You might be able to sign up for a promotion or let them know that you're thinking about moving your services to their competitor Do they have any promotions going on that you might be able to take advantage of? Right? Looking at some of these areas, and I know again that for some of us this feels like a waste of time. Oh, me saving $70 is a waste. I'm not to be bothered by it. But if you save $70 a month in one area, maybe in your car insurance, right? That we're talking about $840 from just one area that you made an improvement. Looking at your cable bill, maybe you're saving $25 a month. Again, we're talking about $30 or $300 a year that we've saved. We're now already over $1,000 of savings. You take this and you realize that oftentimes in the absence of big goals, these little nibbles that happen are completely fine. Not realizing that in most cases, people's wealth are completely demolished because of death by 1,000 cuts. When we think of it as in the absence of those big goals, you maybe don't have clarity on where you want your investments to be, where you want your savings account to look like, what retirement looks like for you, or what financial independence looks like for you. In the absence of that, it's totally easy to go and spend an extra $25 here, an extra $80 here, an extra $15 here. If you think of that concept of an extra $10,000 is just $30 of incidentals that happen every single day. That's an extra bottle of wine. That's an appetizer every time that you go out. That is, again, a subscription that you're paying for or something that auto-renews that you've not used anymore. Getting clarity around your finances and having a firm understanding of what is there and how you're able to make changes is going to be one of those biggest determining factors on where you're spending your energy and your time. So we have our business expenses, and you want to make sure that whether you work with a CPA or financial planner, I'm going to do a disclaimer, I'm neither of those things, but you want to make sure that you're planning for the appropriate taxes. For many of you that are on here, you are self-employed or you're an independent contractor, you're a business owner, which means you're paying taxes as a business and then you're paying taxes as a self-employed individual. So thinking about the money that comes through the business is going to be taxed once. And then the money that goes through the business is taxed once. And then the money that you put into your personal account is taxed twice because of that self-employment tax. So with this, we want to make sure that when we're looking at our business expenses, that we set a percentage of how much we're going to be saving for taxes on those business expenses. So let's say for my business expenses, I'm allocating 20% or 15% for my taxes on any of that money, right? So money comes in, goes into the business account. Anything that is left over after expenses is the profit for the business. I am paying 15% or 20% taxes on that. Now, anything that I then move over to my personal account is then going to be taxed twice. So I need to make sure that if, let's say through this exercise, I realize that it costs me $10,000 a month to run my household. And that is money that then has to go into my personal account so that I can then pay for these expenses like my car, like my groceries, like my liquor bill, right? All of those things are then going to be taxed twice. So depending on your tax bracket, maybe that is you're saving 25% or 35% of that amount. So in each of these cases, I want to take my business, what it costs for me to run my business. Then I want to make sure that I'm planning for the taxes for my business expenses. I'm looking at how much it costs me to run my life and the taxes that I need to save for in order to pay for that. And then I'm also going to go with all of those life of intention things that we had planned a little bit earlier. So the experiences that you'd like to have, the memories you'd like to share. Doug and I would like to take his parents for their 50th wedding anniversary, which is in 2 years, to Alaska. And we want to do an Alaskan trip, and that's going to be a gift from us. And so thinking about how much a 10-day or a 14-day trip is going to be for the four of us to really do it the way that we'd like to, let's just say that that is going to cost $20,000. Well, if I'm taking that $20,000, that's going to be a part of my plan that I want that money to be saved by the end of next year so that I have everything paid for and that we don't have to worry about it. Well, that $20,000 trip also is going to require for me to save for the taxes for those $20,000, right? So I need to plan for maybe an additional 35% or 30%, whatever the number is that you've put down as your estimated tax percentage. That is the amount that I need to save on top of the $20,000. So this idea of I need to make roughly $28,000 in order to pay the taxes on the $28,000 and to have the $20,000 left over for Alaska. So the idea here is I figured out my business expenses and how much it costs to operate my business plus those taxes. How much does it cost to operate my household if I was not to change my lifestyle at all this next year, plus the taxes for that, and then any of those life of intention activities. Maybe I'd like to buy an investment property. Maybe I'd like to go to Alaska. Maybe I would like to pay off my mortgage or become completely debt-free, pay off my credit cards. Whatever you've written down on what a life of intention looks like for you in this next year, we have to put a monetary amount next to it. How much is this going to cost? So often when I would do this exercise in previous years, someone would say to me, I want a Range Rover. Okay, well, how much is a Range Rover going to cost you? Is it brand new? Is it used? Have you priced it out? Have you gone to the dealership based on the interior that you're looking for, based on the wheels that you want, all of the upgrades? Have you actually gone all the way through the process just before checking out to figure out how much that cost is going to be? Are you planning to pay for the entire thing in cash, or are you going to finance it? Right? So this process is, instead of just having a dream board, which is if I won the lottery, this is the first thing that I would do, but I have no plan of action to actually see it through based on my current lifestyle or my current income. That's a dream. It's a vision. It's a nice to have if it would ever come to fruition. And if it doesn't, oh well. But when I have a clearly defined goal, that is, I'd like a Range Rover, and then I go and I price it out and I realize that it's $123,000 out the door, and maybe I am going to put half down and I'm going to finance the other half. Okay? Well, again, I need to plan for that $60,000 or the $62,000 that I'm going to put down. And by when do I want to have that Range Rover? By when do I want to have that $60,000 saved so that I could make that purchase? Again, I do not particularly care on what are the things that you put on a life by design or a life of intention. What I care about is that you have clearly defined what are those trips, what are those materialistic things, what are the experiences, what is the peace of mind. Maybe it's a sleep at night number. You want to make sure that your checking account has $50,000 in it at all times. It never goes below that. And you'd like to have 6 months of your personal and business expenses saved in a savings account. And if I have those two things in my accounts, then I can sleep at night. I'm not going to be as worried about unexpected costs. I'm not going to be worried about certain things that could come around or freak me out. Maybe that is what a life of intention looks like for you over this next year. But the concept here is that we're able to go through this process, and instead of picking a random number, of course, when I'm working with someone new and asking them, well, what's your goal for this next year? They say 300,000. Okay, where did that number come from? I don't know. It sounds like a good number. That person is probably not very committed to 300,000. If I wrote them a check for 250,000 and asked them, would that be okay? And they go, well, sure. I mean, I've never made anything more than 150,000. What we realize is that the goal was never really 300,000. There was no purpose behind it. There was no intention. There was no meat to the conversation. Sorry to my vegans. That's an old analogy. But this concept of going, I really don't have any skin in the game if I'm just picking a random number. Again, that's why we're doing this series over the course of 6 weeks, so that you can really take time to formulate what's important to you. What are those meaningful things that you wrote about in your obituary? How do you want to live a life of intention, and how does your business help you execute on that life of intention? So take a little bit of time now to go through this process. If you need to work through any of those numbers, we will have the form, of course, attached to this so that you can go through and kind of look at what are your business expenses, what are your lifestyle expenses, and what does a life of intention look like for you? What are the taxes for each of those areas? And once we get all of those numbers together, that is the amount of money that you need this next year for your goals. All right, for any of you that maybe math is not your greatest strength, it's not the thing that you love to do, again, just a reminder, you absolutely love math when I write you a check or if I give you cash. You got no problem counting it very, very quickly at that point. So taking some responsibility and understanding that, just as we talked about in session 1 of running your business like a business, is I actually want you to run your household like a business. There's a great quote by Jay-Z that I reference often that is not, I am not a businessman, I am a businessman, right? The comma goes in between business and man. And the idea here is that Jay-Z is using this as a way of reminding everyone that he's running his household like a business. You know, if you looked at the way that you've run your household in years past, and I asked you if this was a business and you hired a bookkeeper, what would they say? Would you be in the red or would you be in the black? Are you a healthy business? Are you a business that is critical of your expenses? You know, so often we'll also have people who are very diligent about knowing how much they spend on ads for their business, how much they're spending on salaries for their business, but they have no idea how much they spent on groceries last year. They have no idea on how much they spent eating out, right? And so the idea here is, again, not that this comes from a place of judgment. If you like me, love going out and eating out, especially with friends, breaking bread and having community, then you might say that you've allocated money because that's a very important aspect of your life. If you find that you're just eating out because it's subsistence or you don't want to cook at home, there might be other alternatives that still get you the same goal, but is able to also save you money so that you can reallocate those savings into areas that you want, into those life by design activities that you said. So this process of moving through and taking a discovery and looking at your household like a business is one of the most transformative things that you can do to help build your wealth and to build a life by design. You know, one of my favorite things to say to people is an understanding that wealth is built in the gap between income and expenses. And just as we mentioned for that, you know, usually someone's wealth is deteriorated by, you know, death by 1,000 cuts. It is the $25 at Amazon today and $85 at Target tomorrow, and the going out to the restaurant and buying 2 or 3 extra rounds of cocktails instead of waiting to go home and having a bottle of wine. It's these little things that happen that all of a sudden accumulate to an extra $3,000 or an extra $5,000 a month, that at the end of the year, that $36,000 or that $50,000 could have been the difference between you working a little bit less or you having a little bit of padding to have some security to take a leap of faith or to reallocate your money into something else, or in the midst of a recession, be able to not worry so much about whether or not you're going to have a closing in the month of February, right? This idea of living with intention is not just about the things that you're doing on your calendar. It is how you spend your money. It is how you spend your time. It's about the relationships that you're giving energy and time to. Living with intention is having a conscious idea and a conscious awareness of all of these aspects of your life, which is so important as to why we spend and do a holistic approach, because you can be wildly successful, be on panels where people are asking you your opinion on how you built your business, and be absolutely miserable at home. Now, if that's what you want, I might not necessarily be the guy for you. But if you're looking to have a great business and to have a wonderful life and to have great relationships with the people who matter to you and not have a relationship with the people who don't, then keep with me, keep with this process and commit to this as you're moving through this series on how to build an intentional life for you and next year. Okay, so you figured out your total number. Let's say that based on my business expenses, based on my lifestyle, and based on my life of intention activities, plus the taxes that are involved in all of that, I need to make $200,000 a year. Now, thinking about that number, maybe that's that $200,000, which includes taxes, which includes my business expenses, which includes my personal expenses. I then have to ask myself, how am I going to get there? So going back to the activity that you did in our first step of the series, thinking about where your business has come from, so you have to ask yourself, well, how much did I already make this past year? What's the gap between what I made this past year and what I said was my goal for next year? Based on those two numbers, can I look at my activities, and do I believe that if I changed nothing about my activities, I would be able to make up that difference between this year and next year? If the answer is yes, fantastic. If the answer is yes, but I need to amplify it, well, wonderful. We get clarity around how we're going to do that in our coming series. But this is a way of you being able to determine how many transactions you need to do. So series 1 told us the number of units you did. It told us what your average sales price per transaction looked like. And it told us how many transactions you needed to do. So based on that $200,000 number that we used, if we were to divide that by the average that I make per transaction, that's going to tell me how many transactions I need next year. So again, let's use the example of real estate. So let's say that in real estate, I want to make $200,000 a year. I make an average of $10,000 per transaction. I would take that $200,000 number, I would divide it by 10,000, and that would get me the total number of units that I would need. In this case, that would be 20. I would need 20 transactions in order to make $200,000. You take the same series or the same process for yourself and looking at how many transactions based on the business that I run would I need in order to fund my life of intention. Now, like I mentioned in our first series, this is going to be some of the heavy lifting. Again, it can feel overwhelming to be in the weeds of understanding your numbers, looking at your business, looking at the bank accounts, looking at some of those activities, and that's completely understandable. Take your time this next week and go back through this process. Do not cut corners. If you're still watching this and you've not completed your obituary, please go back and do it. If you need to go through and run your numbers based on your bank statements so that you can figure out how much you spent on groceries, how much you spent on your cell phone bill, how much you spent, you're already going to need to do this activity anyway for tax purposes. You might as well get a head start by looking at some of these things. I know I've talked to you about this before. Your bank might already do this for you. It'll show you how much you've spent. It'll categorize where you've put that money, right? Maybe it's going to show you 30,000 at restaurants or whatnot. You might want to take a little bit of a closer look. If you know that maybe you're a cigarette smoker, and so, the bank is going to automatically look at a $6 purchase at a Citgo, and it's probably going to auto-categorize that as gasoline or auto expense. But you and I know that if it's a $6 or $8 cost that you did at Citgo, it was probably you buying a pack of cigarettes, right? So we have to go through this process and make sure that we are being very truthful with ourselves on how much we're spending on certain lifestyle choices versus what are some of those expenses that are there. Go through this process so that you can see where you're spending your money, where you're spending your time and energy, and then you get to make a conscious decision on, do I want to double down on this next year? Are there areas that we maybe went a little out of control this past year in terms of spending? Maybe there's some areas that we've not done enough of, like travel. Maybe that's something that you said was a part of your life of intention, and it really wasn't an item that you spent any money on this past year. Well, then this next year, we might want to have a discussion about how much you want to put away, how frequently you want to travel, what is the type of traveling you want to do. Maybe you say, we want to do 2 domestic travels and 1 international trip. And we're going to say $5,000 per domestic travel and $10,000 for our international trip. Whatever it might be, right? These are just placeholders. The idea here is that you can be really intentional about those goals as you're setting the cost for next year. But unlike that individual who picked $300,000 out of nowhere because it sounded good, when you're done with this week's work, you're going to have a clear understanding of how much money you need to make next year to fund your life by design. And it's also going to tell you how much work you need to do. Next week is when we're going to be talking about what are the activities we need to do in order to achieve this goal. So I'm very much looking forward to you doing this work, having this discussion with you. As always, a reminder that we do the live Q&A each Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern. That's where if you have any questions about this, you want clarity, you're able to go in and have that discussion with me. In addition to that, this is also maybe where you're having ahas and insights. Use this time and use your reflective resource to give some of those information, and more importantly, take advantage of this community. We have the community tab in the app. You're able to lean on one another and be able to share some of these experiences. These next couple of weeks that we're doing this process is going to be as much that you put into it is going to be how much you get out of it. Lean on this community, lean on me, lean on these resources so that you can have a clear understanding of what your life of intention looks like and how you're going to go out and get it. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next week for our series here on the Self-Made Mastery series. Take care.